Welcome to How Not to DM. I'm your host, Derek. Thanks for joining me on my quest to interview the very best dungeon masters on this plane of existence. Before we get started, I need to shout out my newest patrons, Pun, Jeff, and Jeff. Thanks so much for your support. You helped make this episode happen. If you'd like to support the show, want a shout out on my next episode, or want an inside scoop on my upcoming guests, consider joining. You can find the link in my episode notes, my Linktree, or by heading to patreon.com/HN2DM. One more quick announcement I'm really excited about. I have a few friends in the podcasting world, like Bombarded, who donate a percentage of their ad and patron money to good local causes, so I've decided to follow suit. As of January 2022, 10% of the money I bring in from ads and supporters like you will be donated to Encircle, a nonprofit organization with the mission to bring the family and community together to enable LGBTQ+ youth to thrive. Encircle has built a couple homes locally and is planning on building others in neighboring cities and states for LGBTQ+ youth to have a place to hang out and enjoy a safe space. They have daily programs, friendship circles, offer therapy on site, and even have a D&D club. It's on hiatus because of COVID, but I'm really excited to go join in on the fun once they're able to start playing again. Overall, I think it's an amazing cause and I'm really excited to help support it. Check out the episode notes or go to encircletogether.org for more information. Now, on to our guest intro. Todd Stashwick is an incredibly talented actor and writer with over 120 credits on IMDB and counting. He's played hardened villains, brooding anti-heroes, lovable protagonists, and most importantly, D&D. Todd has some really cool tips on making your improv and roleplay more intentional, and has shared the table with some incredibly talented people like Liam O'Brien, Satine Phoenix, Jasmine Bhullar, Patrick Warburton, and many more he mentions in this episode. Enjoy!
A little bit about myself. I'm a Chicago boy, born and raised in Illinois, suburbs outside of Chicago. Moved back to the city. I mean, I like, if you watch Stranger Things, that was, aside from the portals to the meat monsters, that was my upbringing. I was that kid. I was the Spielberg kid on the bike with his friends playing D&D, playing Star Wars action figures. I was literally that kid. I was the target audience. I was born in 68, so in 1980 I was 12. So I'm that kid. And I did a lot of cartooning and stuff in high school. I really enjoyed acting, and so that's what I pursued as a career. Went to college for it, moved to New York with it. I did Second City in Chicago, did a lot of theater in New York, and then slowly clawed my way into television and film, and that's where I sit, and now I write, and I write video games and screenplays and pilots and comic books and all of that stuff. As far as TTRPG, I was that kid. So I was, back in the day, I think I first laid my eyes on my first D20 probably around 78, and then I started playing D&D around 79. So like my first person, my cousin Tori, introduced me. It was clear as a bell. Like, I just remember sitting in his garden level apartment for a second. We were upstairs visiting my uncle and went downstairs, and he like takes out a character sheet and he takes out some dice, and it was just one of those, like, what is that? Like, I didn't grok it at the time how like these plastic math rocks and a piece of paper equaled the Rankin and Bass Hobbit. Like, somehow there was a connection to the two, but it didn't quite make sense to my then 10-year-old eyes. And then a year later, it was a brush fire amongst just nerd boys and girls. So I started playing with the neighbors and my cousin and friends from school and church, and started the D&D club in my junior high school. My cousin collected all of the signatures and got a student advisor, and we would do movie nights where we would get the AV department to like wheel in a big 1/4-inch VCR, and we would watch like Hawk the Slayer. But I grew up on like all the Hobbit, the Bakshi Hobbit, and all Beastmaster. Like that was my world. And then around like so 3 years in, early 80s is when the Satanic Panic hit, and I was that impressionable kid that went to some camp, and all the camp counselors told us that it was the gateway to Satan. And my parents didn't feel that way. They were super supportive. They're like, my dad made me my Dungeon Master's box, and I had all my books and everything, but I gave it all away. I came back from that camp and I made a hard break from it, and didn't think about it again until 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, when I was at an audition, told this story before, but an actor named Abraham Ben Ruby, he just sort of offhandedly said, we were up late playing D&D. And now, years later, I don't have the superstitions that I had as a kid. And I was like, wait, you were doing what? And he's like, yeah, we were playing D&D. And he was playing with Lillard and a bunch of people. Well, I wasn't going to insinuate myself into his game, but I was suddenly like, wait, grown-up people play Dungeons and Dragons? And it was just, I didn't do it in college. I was doing theater and I was doing a bunch of other stuff. I was playing video games and things like that, but I just wasn't playing D&D. But to know that it was out there again amongst grown-ups, and it was like kind of a quiet secret. People were playing poker, but they weren't playing D&D. And so I went on eBay, and before they were really collector's items again, I went back and bought all my original books. I actually have one right here. I bought back like my Fiend Folio, and I bought back the Player's Handbook and all those original ones, the AD&D books from the 80s, 70s, and 80s, and I just started just collecting them again, just to look at the drawings and to just get that old feeling back. And then sort of hit a critical mass, and then when 5E hit, I was like, that's it. I want to play Dungeons and Dragons. I put it on Facebook. I said, I want to play. And my buddy Yuri Lowenthal, he's a really successful voiceover artist and actor. He shows up at my house an hour later after seeing my post with the starter kit. And he said, me too. And I want to say this is like late 2015. And he's like, happy birthday. Yeah, so it was around October 2015. He's like, happy birthday. And he hands me the starter kit. He's like, let's play D&D. And I'm like, I love it, because he hadn't been back into it yet either. And right as that happened, I booked 12 Monkeys and left LA for 3 years. But in the middle of all that, late 2016, so this is a long story, but it'll end soon. Long story, but for 12 Monkeys, the sort of request came down from one of the producers that they wanted me in like prison yard shape for season 3. I'm like, I'm 48. What does that mean? So I hired a trainer and I hired a nutritionist, and I just went at it full bore. But my trainer was David Nett. Now, David Nett is one of the founding people who really started carving out streaming D&D back when nobody was doing it. And he was oddly, when I was training with him for 12 Monkeys, he was also training Matt and Marisha. So it was like, so I was dipping my toe back into it, and I had this amazing Sherpa who said, look, when 12 Monkeys ends, and it'd be done by the end of 2017, I will start a table for you and Yuri, and we'll get a bunch of people, and we'll start ongoing. And this month we'll start the 5th year we've had the same table. So that's my long journey into D&D with that old school AD&D, and then my journey back. And I haven't left the table since late 2017, when I started, reading the new player's handbook and started character building. I think we had a session 0, and then we actually started the campaign in early 2018. So it's been 4 full years. We're now heading into our 5th with the same campaign. And then dungeon mastering, my 11-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old daughter at the time, was like, what is that, Dad? What are you doing? I'm like, it's Dungeons and Dragons. She's like, I want to play. So I cracked open the starter kit and grabbed a bunch of her friends and was sort of compelled into learning how to DM again for a bunch of 10-year-olds. And that's how I started DMing again.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I wonder how many people out there like you were scared out of it and have refound the hobby, There must be quite a few, but yeah, that's an interesting thought.
Well, Anthony Rapp, he and I talked about it because we have similar journeys. I don't think it was Satan that pushed him out of it. He was a Chicago kid who started playing in the 80s and then came back to it in his late 40s, early 50s.
So you mentioned running games for your daughter and her friend. Do you have a memory of the first game you ran way back when you were a kid? Yeah.
Well, we ran the modules, as we called them then. Back in the day, we would eagerly wait the little pamphlet because you would use the cover as your DM screen because it had all the maps already on the inside of it. So I think one of the first ones we dove into was like In Search of the Unknown and Keep on the Borderlands. Those were the first ones, and they came with the box, I think. And then we were also playing Gamma World and Boot Hill and Top Secret. And then I remember homebrewing one that was all based on Clash of the Titans. And it was like, and I thought it was super clever because it was the land of Asir, which was Greece spelled backwards. I thought I was super clever. But it was like, it was a two, and there was like Medusas and Pegasus. And because everybody was watching Clash of the Titans, so I wanted to run like a Greek mythology one. So I remember drawing the maps for that. Wish I still had them. I wish I still had all my old character sheets. My buddy David still has all his. He's been running kind of contiguously since the 80s,
Uh-huh.
running games. So he never gave it up, really.
Yeah, it would be cool to kind of run down memory lane with all those. Like you said, looking at all the old pictures of the books you used to have, I'm sure it'd have a similar effect.
Makes me happy.
So, running games, I'm sure these might kind of be more recent examples, but what do you feel like are some of the mistakes that you've had to learn from as a dungeon master?
Over prep is a big one, and every DM will tell you because it's like your players are going to break it. And I just remember being terrified running Fandelver. I'm like, I have to read and memorize this entire book, and I have to make laminated pictures of all of my monsters, and I have to verbatim, and so there was a lot of over prep. And then because I mostly outside of Fandelver, I mostly was running one shots. So I was doing one shots once a month for off and on for the last 4 years. And the first ones were the Sly Flourish Fantastic Adventures. David's like, here, these are great. These are going to give you some rails so that you can see how a one shot is structured. And then I would homebrew within them until eventually the written adventures would fall away and I was just homebrewing my own. But when it came to homebrewing, I think I was doing too many encounters. And then suddenly this thing was like a 8 hour game and you're like, oh, wait, oh. So I think I was not realizing how much analysis paralysis goes on when you put them in front of a door and then they end up talking about should we pick the lock? Should we listen? How would it should we go through that door? Maybe we should go up the and you're like, we open the door. The fight's on the other side of the door. So not understanding the mind, how players will perseverate if you just say like, and the sound of the wind, and there's a creek in the air. Where's the creek? Is the creek down the hallway? Let's go investigate the creek. And you're like, oh no, I shouldn't have said creek.
Yeah.
As you're improvising, you suddenly realize that you're throwing the spotlight on things that you never intended to then cause your players to derail all of your prep. So, A, don't prep as much. And B, David's like, no, you know what? One encounter an hour of gameplay. If you're probably going to do a 5 hour game, maybe combat encounters, and then other problem solving stuff, including when you order pizza and when everybody takes bio breaks and when you're mixing drinks and all of that. So those were some early kind of rookie mistakes. Was just over prepping. That's why, again, I sound like I'm a commercial, but Sly Flourish has those great lazy dungeon master guides. They are essential reading for DMs.
Yeah, I have my copy just over here too. Yeah, I love that book.
So good.
As far as memories of cool stuff that's happened in your games, what are some of the ones that stick out that all of you, all of the players or the DM still talk about to this day?
One of my favorite things that it's like you have this moment that it occurs to you. So this was as a player. My character is a sorcerer. And so we had just come out of the Tomb of Elemental Evil and we got captured and we were stripped of all our weapons. And I woke up, chained and bloody and my eye had gotten put out and I was stripped. I was like naked and I'm a sorcerer. And then I'm like, what do I do? And then I go, all right, DM, what are the odds after crawling around the temple element and we're being attacked and we're trying to escape, right? We finally get out of our shackles. I go, what are the odds that after crawling around in the catacombs of the Temple Elemental, that I might have some sulfur and bat guano beneath my fingernails. And he goes, yeah, you would. So it was one of those moments where, like, just thinking narratively, how, without any of my components, am I going to be able to cast and get us out of this? So it was just this like scrambling up the stairs naked, like it was like out of that Viggo Mortensen film where they're fighting naked in the sauna, Eastern Promises. Anyway, there's an amazing scene. He's like in a sauna, and it's a fight scene, but just filthy and bloody and naked, and then just trying to race up the spiral staircase while I'm just casting fireball based on a little bit of gunk that was left in my fingernails from the previous adventure. So that was fun, kind of mathing out the reality of the narrative and how I can use it. Years or two ago, we had received treasure, and one of the items that my buddy Chris Monfett, he was a writer for 12 Monkeys, he's at our table. One of the items that he got was a ring of number numbing or number confusion. And it's basically you can cause somebody not to be able to do math. And he's like, I don't know why I got this, but I got it. And he kept it for years. So we were in this classic, Tolkien way, trapped with a red dragon in his lair with his hoard of money. And Chris decided to do a gentleman's wager with the dragon to let us go for free. He scooped up some coins and put them in his pocket. He's a rogue, so he scooped up some coins. And he says, okay, oh great and powerful dragon, surely you are the master of your treasure. And so David was role playing it with like, don't insult me. Of course I know every coin that's in here. And then he said, all right. And he bet him if he could tell him, based on his knowledge of the room of coins, how many coins he had in his pocket. Because dragons are smart and they know their treasure. How many coins do I have in my pocket? If you can guess that, you can eat us all. And if you can't guess it, you let us go and you owe us a favor. So the dragon just smugly takes the bet, and Chris takes out the ring of number confusion. And it was like one of these moments where we were actually in my yard because it was still during the pandemic, but we were social distance playing. And everybody else was on their feet watching them RP this scene. And David rolled a wisdom check at disadvantage because of the number confusion, and he failed the check. And so he outwitted a red dragon, and we all just went on our merry way with, we left a messaging stone with the dragon saying, we're going to call. So those are two player examples. And then one really fun moment of just having the freedom to explore and play with a group of people that you love. I was doing a charity game with some wonderful, wonderful players, David Nett and Satine Phoenix and Brandon Cleely. And it was like a cat-themed game. We were all playing cats because it was for a cat rescue. There was a moment where the pirate ship and a ship was about to, board and attack, and David was playing Elmeounster, a mage, like a dark mage. It was just silliness. But he wanted to cast Shatter on the mast of the other boat to stop its forward motion. So he cast Shatter, and I rolled a con save against the wood just to see, what would it do. And of course I failed it. And so I stopped and I just began the story. Once upon a time in a forest, a tree dreamed of the ocean. And it was basically the Giving Tree. It was like, and he would watch the gulls overhead as he would feel the sea breeze sway his top, and he was happy. But he just wanted to see the sea. And then it was like, and then some loggers came and took it, and they shaped it, and they hewn it, and he was built onto a mighty sea vessel, and he was happy. And he went out to sea, and he saw many adventures. And over the sky, now the gulls came to him and perched upon him as he set out to sea, as they rest in the middle of blah, blah, blah. And then he exploded. just, it was just this wonderful, like, just to take the time to like tell the backstory of the mast of the ship was one of my favorite things that like play with the people that you play with and them affording you the indulgence and just allowing yourself to go to these wonderful, silly places and knowing where it's going. And you're watching the faces of all the players going, "Oh no, here we go, here we go."
We know what he's doing.
That was
Oh
super
man,
fun.
that is really funny. I'll have to go find the VOD of that and watch it. Who do you feel like are the greatest influences on you running games? Who do you draw from?
Oh God, I'm a shameless thief. Yeah. Well, first and foremost, David Nett is responsible for so much of my understanding of he's my it's like one of those things where I imagine he gets sick of it and just goes, just open the Dungeon Master's Guide, Todd. You don't have to call me. And then like Satine, of course, I've had the good fortune of sitting at her tables. Abria Iyengar, I love her stuff. I've watched Mercer, of course, and Liam O'Brien. I love how Abria, when she's doing initiatives, she will tell who's on deck. Like, you're up, you're on deck. And it just keeps it moving in a beautiful way. Like, I stand on the shoulders of these giants, and I constantly am impressed and amazed. And I will listen to Jasmine Bhullar, who's a friend of mine. And I'm also very fortunate that I know these people too. So I can text them and ask them questions about Dungeons and Dragons. Mike Neistel, I've stolen from him. There's just so many great players out there. Jen Kretschmer, great DMs out there, and I've had the good fortune of B. Dave. Jesus, like I've had a good fortune of being able to sit at the tables of not all of them. I haven't played with Mercer. I haven't sat at Abria's table. I haven't been DM'd by Liam, but I've rolled dice with him. But like Satine and B. Dave and Jasmine and David, like these guys are the ones that I am constantly cribbing from and stealing from and learning from. And I just listened to a great podcast conversation with Brennan, who I haven't, shame on me, I haven't watched Dimension 20 yet. But just listening to his passion and him talk about D&D, and then he was talking about it with Satine, and there was just like gem after gem after gem, and now I'm in the middle of the one with Jasmine, and just gems.
Yeah. Yeah, Brennan's games are zany and off the wall and incredible. So I think you really like them, especially if you're pulling off tree stories.
Yeah, it's funny. I will do zany more for charity streams because those are for an audience. Like the game itself kind of comes secondary to the entertainment. But with my home games, we like humor, but we don't necessarily embrace wacky. We like table talk humor or circumstantial character humor we embrace, but the games tend to be a lot more grounded than when I'm doing like a charity stream. Like I did a charity stream that unbeknownst to the players, it ended up and it was they didn't realize, but they were in a Scooby-Doo adventure. Like at the end, they like literally ripped the mask off the guy, and the guy's name was like Oldman Clemens. His like first name was Oldman, so they went Oldman Clemens, and then there was a dog, but it snuck up on them, and they didn't realize they were in the middle of a Scooby Doo adventure. And I remember B. Dave just like shaking his head. I'm like, thank you. That's the exact response that I wanted when the reveal was it was a Scooby Doo adventure.
Yeah, I think Dimension 20 they recognize that it's entertainment, and that's kind of the vibe they're going for. Exactly. This episode of How Not to DM is brought to you by Gemmed Firefly. Need a fresh new look for the new year? Head on over to gemmedfirefly.com for the newest tees, mugs, and home goods styled with D&D gamer humor and aesthetics. As always, Gemmed Firefly makes every shirt to order, bringing you all of the softest and most comfortable shirts that thousands have come to love. And now, listeners of the show get a discount when you use the code DRAGON at checkout. Find your new favorite shirt at gemmedfirefly.com. Next, check out the latest from Minstrel's Tale. Hail, fellow adventurers, and greetings from the frozen lands of Icewind Dale. Join the DM and players of Minstrel's Tale as they grapple with not only the frigid wastes of this inhospitable land, but the chilly hearts of the people who inhabit it. Tune in every Saturday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time at twitch.tv/Minstrel's Tale. And an awesome publication from Applewhite Games. Explore a city of criminals, find the lost scholar, and discover the forgotten world hidden at the center of Aragarth. Journey to the Center of Aragarth is a D&D 5e campaign for high-level parties looking to test their abilities, live on Kickstarter February until the 28th. So, level up your characters, and don't miss your chance to join the adventure. And finally, a Kickstarter from Icarus Games. Make learning 5th edition easier than ever with the class cheat sheets from Icarus Games now on Kickstarter. Keep track of all of your class abilities with simple language, easy-to-reference icons, and page references for the full rules. And never forget your options in combat thanks to a handy quick reference guide for actions in combat. Kickstarter is live until March 2nd. Sign up at icarus-games.co.uk/Kickstarter. As always, links to all of this great content from all of these creators is available in my episode notes. And now, let's return to the show, starting up with a brand new minigame for Season 2. What about your past experiences or your personality really made you gravitate towards role-playing games?
Well, as a kid, it was a cool thing that we could gather around a table, the fellowship of it. And we were making up stories anyway. Like we would go on hikes and like pretend we were on some sort of dungeon crawl. And then to have the fickle fate of the dice actually shape the outcome of your choices was fun. I mean, and there were successes and losses. And like I said, I was a Hobbit kid, and I was a Lord of the Rings kid, and a Star Wars kid, and so just being able to go, wow, I could actually submerge myself in these realms with my friends. It was so uncool. It was cool. You know what I mean? It was like it was the nerdiest thing you could do. So nerdy. And I was already playing with action figures and doing Star Wars, like creating scenarios. So this was just an evolution of all of that, and and it wasn't like a tabletop like we're opening a Monopoly board or Clue, or it was freer than that, and it encouraged exploration, and I mean so much of it was much more dungeon crawly. In fact, I ran a campaign or an adventure for Dungeon Run that I had done as a home one shot, and it was a very meta tribute to the classic kind of games that we played as kids, because so much of the games that we played as kids were just so arbitrary, where it was like going down a hallway, you enter a room and there's a goblin sitting on a chest. Nowadays, we would go, why? Like, who does that goblin work for? Who is he? What's the backstory of the goblin? Back in the day, it was just like, in the middle of the hall, there's a gelatinous cube. Fight it. Like, why? It's so rando that I did an adventure, and you can find this video on demand, where essentially is to, spoiler, it literally was about a little boy creating an adventure for people. Like adults were sort of forced to go through an adventure. They didn't realize it was all a fabrication of the kid.
Yeah. This is the Dungeon Run, the show with Jeff Kanata, yeah.
Yeah. So Jeff was out that week, and I was asked to guest DM for it. And I had run the game for one of the producers as a home game, and he's like, "Hey, come and run that on Dungeon Run." But it was just so like rando and silly. It was just like traps and monsters, and that's it. And there's no like, there was sort of a loose like, get the gem of Anaka. It's at the very back of the castle. Okay, like there was just no emotion. No one's pie shopping. There's no nothing. It was just dungeon crawl, march through, and that has its charm. Like that has its simple appeal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think every once in a while, that's just really what people want to do, is just go solve a bunch of puzzles and hack and slash and
hack and slash.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. And now it's time for Quickfire Chaos. Welcome to Quickfire Chaos. This week, Todd and I are going to use some random D100 tables to create an NPC fetch quest, and then roleplay a situation to show off Todd's acting and improv skills. Let's get rolling. The first one will be what kind of voice you've got.
Okay. You're so lucky that I happen to have my Nerd Circus dice tower at the ready. That's a 3.
You have a naturally low voice, and every paragraph is a sentence. Your English teacher hated you.
Every paragraph. So it's sort of like Liam Neeson. He speaks very clipped.
Next is your job.
67.
You are a shepherd.
Yes, I'm a shepherd.
There's 2 more. One is a trait that you've got.
68.
That is nervous. Easily agitated.
Very uptight.
Okay. And then lastly, the quest that you're going to send me on.
100.
My last guest yesterday, Guy Sklanders from How to Be a Great GM. I don't know if you know him at all, but he rolled 100 also, which is...
What are the odds?
Yeah, what are the odds? Okay, we're looking for the heart of a nymph.
Exquisite.
Good sir, I hear that you are in need of some assistance.
Welcome to the hills of Indinga. Yes, I am Rothic. I am a shepherd, and as you can see, all of my sheep have turned to stone. Now, I have done the research, and I have found that it is a curse. I have 2 of the components, but one is missing. I need you to venture deep into the woods of Blizzard and find me, the heart of a nymph. It is harvest soon. I must shear these sheep, and I cannot shear stone. And I will go broke. My family will starve. You are the champion that is required. So please, head into the forest of Blizzard and find me, the heart of a nymph. You need not cut it out. What I need for you to do is win her heart.
Oh, that's a twist I did not foresee, but
Ah,
it shall be done.
I'm not a barbarian. I am but a shepherd. I do not ask that you cut the heart of a nymph, but have her return with her undying expression of affection for you. Are you a bard, sir?
I am not, but I know a few songs.
You might want to bring me.
That is a fantastic suggestion. All right, I love it. That was a good twist you gave there too. Okay, this next question comes from some of my patrons. Matthew, thanks for the question. It is, you started your acting career in improvisation, kind of did some work with Second City. So what are the similarities do you feel between acting and improv for television and movies versus improv in TTRPGs? So what are the similarities? And then also, what do you feel like are the differences between the two?
Well, improvisation itself is a tool. It can be used to be a form of theater in and of itself. When I was at Second City, we would use it for games. We would do improvised games, and then we would use it to help devise scenes that we would then go on to script and shape. Then, when I was in New York, I had done a show called Burn Manhattan, where the improv was the means unto itself. Like we would improvise for an hour plus without suggestions, and the show just would go. It was a long form improvisation. Then I would kind of hone it into a more narrative-driven one when I moved to LA and started a show called The Doubtful Guests, where there was a premise. Like, we were 4 people killed in a brothel fire in 1888 London, and our souls were damned to do an improvised show. So there were parameters and a conceit that we were these awful people. We were doing a show within a show, but no reference could exceed 1888 London, and the music was like accordion and mandolin and stand-up bass. You can find actually YouTubes of it called The Doubtful Guests, plural, and put the word improv at the end of that, and you'll find some scenes from that show. We would improvise songs and scenarios, and so that's improv itself as an art form, as I have seen and taught it. I've taught it a lot. I had an improv school in the Valley here. Now, how does that apply to television and film? Well, a buddy of mine, Jay Lacopo, once said, acting is all improvisation, but you happen to be saying what the writer wrote. In that, you are having organic responses to that which you are hearing. And if you're hearing the other characters say something to you, you have an organic thought based on that, based on your character's backstory and history and the circumstances. You will have an organic thought. Now, you'll have that thought, and then you say what the writer wrote with that thought underneath it.
An undertone, yeah.
Like a guy who's afraid to be fired sees his boss wearing a shirt, and he's like, huh, great shirt, boss. Or a guy who is about to quit sees the same shirt, and he's like, yeah, great shirt, boss. Like, so there's like night and day with what's happening in the context of that moment based on the organic improvised thoughts that are the circumstances. So that's how I approach improvisation. I mean, a lot of people confuse improv with I'm making up what I'm saying. That's not always the case. Improvisation is sometimes not what you're not saying at all. Are there moments where I've ad-libbed new pieces of dialogue and then pitched them to the writers and the directors of the thing? And like, yeah, try that one instead. That happens. That happens. Or going, I want to try something, a bit of business or a bit of something where I'm organically creating in the moment. Absolutely. Now, how does that apply to TTRPG? Same rules apply. So, given scenarios that I'm listening to, my players are surprising me with bits of information, just like we just did with rolling dice. You give me new information that then I filter that through my experiences and the images in my head that are illuminated based on the input that I'm getting. So it's always fundamentally about listening. Whether you're doing TTRPG or regular acting or straight up improv, it's all about listening because you need to mine the data for your next bit of content based on what's happening in the room. Now, do you do prep? Do I have parameters and scenarios that I have pre-scripted in terms of NPCs and circumstances? Of course I do. But the improvisation comes in when they zig, I have to zag. So it's all the same tool. It's listening, heightening, exploring, yes anding. Now, in D&D, the dice are also there to help shape the narrative. Said this the other day on another podcast, but the most controversial tweet I ever got or I ever tweeted, which is ridiculous, which is what I love about D&D is bad rolls equal great story. And I just thought, well, that's not in Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe in other RPGs, it's baked into the rules. And I'm like, no, it's actually baked into the rules of D&D. And I actually took a screenshot of the Dungeon Master's Guide and showed them where it was. It literally says bad rolls equal good story. I'm paraphrasing. But downturns are essential to good storytelling because there's no upturns, right? And downturns are given to us by the dice. Our best intentions are put forth, and then the dice go, yeah, good nice try. So what you're saying about improv, you're being nimble. You have to stay super nimble as a DM and go, all right. It's the same thing. It's listening, trusting the inspiration that you're given based on the input that you're given from your partners. Trust it. Put it out there.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. And thanks, Matthew, for that question. What tips and tricks do you have with your acting and your improv background to help dungeon masters who want to improve their table presence? And by table presence, I mean, maybe they feel like they're not being as immersive as they could be, or, they really want to put more work into their characters, more feel into their story. What's some advice you have for people who want to improve that?
Without the story and the theater, it's literally just my numbers versus your numbers, right? That's it. I have a 15 in my head. You rolled a 13. You didn't get a higher number than me. That's the whole game fundamentally at its very base is that. So I don't want to play that game where we just sit there and say, my numbers were higher, your numbers were lower, your numbers were higher. Who cares? So knowing that, everything else is the game. Everything else is Dungeons and Dragons. So you go, well, then it is about painting pictures. Painting pictures. So take your time, set the scenes, describe, enjoy, even if you're reading it out of a book, enjoy reading it, paint the picture, enjoy the silences, let things resonate and sit so that they have impact. And then when you take your time, it's a thing we call it improvisation and commedia dell'arte called don't burn your steps. Do this, then this, then this, then this. Don't try to rush to this. D&D isn't meant to be finished. We're not playing it to finish it. We're playing it to be in it. So live in that. Don't burn your steps. Do one thing at a time. So, for example, I'll use the tree example. I know where it's going with the mast exploding. When I saw the die roll, I pause. I'm behind the dungeon master screen. They don't see what rolls I get. So I take the time to look at the roll and I go, I could go, the mast exploded. But then that's just say, basically going, your numbers were higher than mine. But to look at the roll, I go, well, I know the outcome. He got the desired result. How can I now dance in the sunbeam of this? How can we paint a picture? And then it was the rewinding and going, all right, I'm going to take the time to tell the backstory of the tree that became the mast that exploded. But we're not in any hurry. We're not rushing. It all depends on gameplay and the group that you have. Like some groups just want to get, like, when can we start stabbing things? And so you got to know your table. But I think people show up at my table for the story and for the fun and for the characters and for the tale that we're weaving and the surprises. And the dice are there to help guide and shape that. So I would say take your time and enjoy the storytelling. Enjoy the performance of a character. And you don't have to do voices. And you can say, and they respond. You can be third person. She looks at you with a glower and she says, there's no way you are all going to be allowed to stay in the inn. You're covered in blood. Like, you could say that as opposed to, get those filthy things off, go wash up before you set foot in mine. Like, there's so many different types of play style that don't feel beholden to do someone else's. But I would say slow it down. You're the dungeon master. You are the painter of the picture.
Yeah. All right. Have you introduced anybody from your work in film and TV to D&D, to tabletop role-playing games? And who from those industries is most fun to play with for you?
I got to do a game for a bunch of 12 Monkeys people, whether they were writers and actors. And it was, and Aaron Stanford was at that table, and Amanda Schul was at the table. And Amanda had never played D&D, and it was adorable. And Amanda's like such a, like a note taker, and she's like, boom, she will put all the tabs in the books, and she's like really buttoned down in her approach to things. And so she was going to do it right, and it was really fun because she just kept, every time she would cast a spell, she would say bippity boppity boo, and it made me the happiest boy. She's like, and then we bippity boppity boo, and then Aaron Stanford really took to the game, and I've played with him like 3 times now, and he's a fantasy nerd, so he really like leaned in hard to the game and loves it, and he's so fun. And one of my favorite moments, because he has a sort of wonderful kind of, he's got a leadership quality to him, and and he wants to kind of pool opinions. And there was one moment where they come into town and all the town folks were turned to stone, and then he goes, we have a Medusa situation here. And he was not wrong, but that's not what turned them to stone. But there was a Medusa at one point. It was thematic. Um, so he's just really, I've had him back several times. I would have Amanda back, but she's now got a baby, a little one at home, and so her time has been taken up with motherhood in between acting on every, she's done so many movies and things, TV movies and things since 12 Monkeys, and then she was on Suits right after, like, so she never stops working either. And then I also got to bring Patrick Warburton to the table.
Oh,
That was a whole lot of fun. Yeah.
had he ever played?
His boys play, and so he introduced me to his boys, who are his son Talon is a DM, and he's a terrific DM, and I've rolled dice with him. And then one day, Talon and these other players came over with Patrick to my nerd lair, and I had done a pilot with Patrick years ago, and so I had always offered to run a game for him. And then when his boys were getting into it, he called me. He's like, "My boys are getting into these Dungeons and Dragons, so I need you all to meet." And so he came over and he played a barbarian named Kronk, and it was we had a blast, and he landed the killing blow to the big bad, and it was really fun, and he was just really curious because his boys were into it, and he wanted to celebrate something his boys were doing. I say boys, they're men, they're in their 20s, but that was really fun.
Oh
Yeah, it was
man,
really fun.
that's a
Yeah,
spot on Patrick Warburton too. That's really good.
yeah, he's fun to do. He's fun.
Oh man, that would have been a very fun game. You've portrayed quite a few kind of intimidating villain and anti-hero types of late. In your opinion, what makes a really memorable villain, and what do you like to draw from when you're playing them on screen and at your table?
Villains, as I have seen them, obviously they don't think they're wrong. There's always a moral dilemma with villains, where the thing that separates them from a hero is they are unable to change. So, given that moment, which is why Darth Vader is historically actually a hero because of that big change, and the Emperor not so much. So for me, I like to, especially in modern day, unless I'm playing, a Disney villain, which I've done, they tend to, the ones that I am gravitated towards, they tend to have a bit of heartbreak in them. And you need to, at some sliver of a way, think they might be a little right. Think they might be a little right and be sympathized with them. Plus, I mean, having come from comedy, I always end up being left of center villains, wanting to weave in my own personal, rhythms and sense of humor into the performance, so that you go, oh, I kind of like this guy. Oh, he's kind of fun. And when he shows up on screen, there's a little bit of like, oh, he's fun. Same with like Heath Ledger's Joker. Like you watch that and you go, he's not wrong sometimes, and he's certainly having a good time being. So between being Batman or the Joker, you go, well, that guy's having a lot more fun. Like in life, he's having a lot more fun, and that's I think if you can find their sense of humor, they're not all twirling mustaches. If you can find their, and maybe they're conflicted, but ultimately they choose poorly. And so, how does that apply to tabletop? It's the same thing. I think they just, tabletop villains they may not come across at first as a villain when you first meet them, and that's often what I do get to play. At first blush, you go, nah, he's hard, but he's not a bad guy. Oh, whoa, whoa, wait a second. Except for Dr. Draken, like that, like from word go, he's just a mustache twirling, scenery chewing villain. But most of the time, and how I apply that to D&D is I like it when you don't see the villain coming. I like that, and then also weaving in humor, and not like wacky, but when you're improvising a scene, finding how this person thinks something's funny, not Todd's making a joke necessarily, because that'll happen too, but how does this person find this scenario humorous, and what kind of in-world joke would they make, or levity that they would add to the scenario.
All right, you referenced your dice tower a little bit earlier from Nerd
My
Circus.
shameless Saturday promo.
Yes, indeed. So, what is Nerd Circus? How did it start? And what are you most proud of so far that you have created?
So it originally started years ago. I had seen, I was looking at these people that I admire, Joe Manganiello, and seeing like how he was able to share with the world the lens to which he views D&D, which is that great Conan O'Brien, the Death Knight, that Orcus and Vecna. Like there's this great gothic, steel and blood approach with death saves, heavy metal. And I was like, well, that's cool. And I love it. And I own plenty of death save stuff. I would love to throw my hat in the ring and share what D&D feels like for me. And being a kid from the late 70s, early 80s, we played D&D in wood paneled basements with orange shag carpeting, and there was lava lamps, and there were Burger King glasses that we drank our drinks out of. And that was primarily the vibe to which I was approaching D&D. And I'm like, we kept our dice in Crown Royal bags. We kept our dice and our pencils and minis and cigar boxes. And so I wanted to create a site that celebrated that. that sort of late 70s, early 80s vibe of D&D for me. Not saying that it's a better way to play. It's just that feels like home. When I'm playing D&D, it's Zeppelin and Styx. It's not heavy metal. It's sort of prog rock and Kansas and all of that kind of freewheeling Americana rock. And so that was the impulse to create the site, is sort of share my love of the game in a way that looks through that lens. So that's why like my Mai Tai glasses look like old Burger King glasses, and the dice are like lava lamp dice.
Yeah, those are really
Uh,
cool.
Thanks. And so I wanted the dice tower to look like a basement. So it's wood panel carpeting and orange shag rug.
That's so
Um,
funny. I just bought a house that we're in now. That's why I have all these boxes, and it's a '70s
Congratulations.
place. And
Yeah.
I found the wood paneling behind the walls that they've covered up. So I might take
Yeah.
down the built-ins and let it air out a little bit. Yeah.
Let it ride. And so I'm proud of everything on the site. And then there's T-shirts that are inspired by nerdy properties that I've been on, Supernatural and 12 Monkeys, and then paraphernalia like dice and dice towers and inspiration tokens and all of that fun stuff. Because I'm a collector. Like I only want to put out there things that I would buy myself. The thing that I think I'm most proud of is the collaboration, which is Mystic Libations. That makes me the most proud because it exceeded expectations. It came out organically with my friendship with Brandon and his love of Tiki and my love of Tiki, and then me being able to introduce D&D to him and him finding love for D&D. It just came out so good. And then having people on Kickstarter respond the way they did, and I brought to the table all the D&D stuff, and then I enlisted like David Nett to do magic items and NPCs, and then I wrote the adventure and the short stories, and then Brandon created his character, and then we fleshed it out, and there's a narrative in it, and there's a playable adventure as well as like over 100 actual recipes. So Mystic Libations is the kind of the marquee thing. I do love this dice tower though. The nerd circus, it comes with a lid. I love it. I love it. So I'm always trying to think of like new stuff to add to the stable of fun things that I sell on the site.
What are some of your favorite drinks from Mystic Libations, if you had to pick a few?
Well, the Scav King, based on my character, it's essentially a Mai Tai, which I love Mai Tais, but it's made with bourbon, which I love bourbon. So it's sort of a bourbon Mai Tai called the Scav King. I also like the Degini Punch. That's really tasty. The simple one, which is the Bloodthorn Brew, which is dragon's milk, bourbon barrel stout mixed with chocolate port. And it's like if I was a vampire, I imagine that's what blood would taste like because it's just like nom 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 nom. So yeah, I mean, there's so many good cocktails in here because our mixologist is is a bartender at Trader Sam's at Disneyland,
Oh yeah,
a man by the name of Roy Hansel.
there you go.
So they're legit drinks.
All right. So all of that stuff can be found at thenerdcircus.com. I'll make sure to include a link in the episode description so you guys can all check it out.
Thanks.
But yeah, that sounds like it was a lot of fun to make. What are your parting words of wisdom and encouragement to new DMs and to maybe people who are getting back into the hobby like you did?
New DMs, I would highly recommend, if you're running one shots or a campaign, do a pre-written one. Do Fandelver. Do Sly Flourish. Do pre-written campaigns first. Do not try to write. That's just my opinion. Other people will tell you, "Wow, dive in head first." I'm saying the training wheels that it gives you to slowly internalize the shape of an adventure, the shape of an encounter. There's so much else to be in charge of. Running combat, initiative, all of that stuff is hard enough than having to just go, I'm going to write one soup to nuts, which is like, that's far more ambitious than me. And, if you choose to, bless you. I would encourage people to do pre-written adventures first. That's a big, big thing. Beyond that, be a DM. Because some people say, I want to play D&D. I want to play D&D. I can't get a group together. And I heard Brennan say this. He goes, 100% of the people that say, I can't find a group, it's because they're not choosing to be a DM. And so if you're a DM, you are the inviter. You are the one who creates the table. And Watch how quickly you are able to put a table together and start playing D&D. And you'll get to play characters. You'll play NPCs that can join the party and go into combat and do all the things and be part of it for a little bit. If you want to play D&D, start the group. Don't wait for someone to ask you to be a part of it. And just run a one-shot and see if you like it or not. No one's telling you have to start a 5-year campaign. Taste it. Try it. Those are my 2 big headlines.
I feel like the moment people find out I run games, like if they are into it, they're like, oh, well, we should play. Like everybody who wants to play, when they find out you run games, will want to play with you. I have no shortage of players. Yeah.
They're like, DMs are like the 80s high school drug dealer. Where it's like, no one really wants to be one, but they won't get the party started until you show up. And you, as a DM, even if you're not prepping a lot, you know how much prep it takes to get ready, get the party, get people ready. But it's so much easier for people to just go, I want to play D&D. You do it. Like, you go, you know how much the time that is? And one-shots, I like to write them. So that's a whole other mountain to climb, but I love doing it, so I don't mind. And it's a fun preoccupation thought, and you're having a good time. And that's my place where I'm able to bring new people to the table, because it's over and done with in one evening, and get a different group together every week. It's like I used to do an improv show called Mayfly, where I would gather improvisers once a week to do a show, and they would never see each other again on the stage in the same group. And I'm like, that's kind of how this is scratching that same itch, that improv itch that I don't get to do in theaters now. I get to do around a table, and I don't have to charge tickets. I don't have to try and fill a house. I just have to get 6 people who want to show up.
What projects are you working on? Any upcoming streams or appearances or anything you want to plug here?
Upcoming, I have a video game that I co-wrote that I'm very proud of called Forspoken. That will be on the PS5 late May. I'm writing with a group of people on a Marvel game for Skydance New Media. I can't say what game that is because there are trained snipers on me at all times. And then I'm working on a TV thing that I can't talk about at all, that I am so excited about, that I will hopefully be able to talk about sometime this year. Beyond that, I'm going to be at GaryCon. I'm going to be running 3 tables at GaryCon. Streams, if they sound the horn of Gondor, if they light the beacon, I show up. I don't ever plan them, but like if I'm asked to DM a Jasper's game, I'm always there to do it. If I'm asked to jump in on someone else's stream, I do it. I just don't motivate them myself. There's only so much bandwidth. Those are the things to promote. And then always Nerd Circus. People go just check it out. And if you want to know a little bit more about how I see the game and the sort of the spirit of the game for me, that's a good place to look.
Well, thanks so much for your time, Todd. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the stuff I've watched with you in it. I had a DVR in college when 12 Monkeys started, and so it was like my come home from class, decompress, watch a few episodes kind of thing. Yeah, it was great.
Oh, nice.
So,
yeah, it was, I was so proud of that show. It was such a treat to do, and the relationships made on that show endure today, and they are some of my favorite, most wonderful people. And it was it's a show I would watch if I wasn't on it. I have the Word of the Witness right over there in the corner, and it's being held by the medieval witness costume, which is on a mannequin in my, the mask and the hood, and it's the medieval witness. And Terry gave me that, and so they're clutching the Word of the Witness, which is still rolled up. I got to find a place to hang it because it's huge, and I'm not on it anyway, so who cares?
Yeah, who cares? All right, well, thanks a ton, Todd.
Great meeting you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to How Not to DM. Now it's time for a sneak peek into next week's guest, Robert Hartley GM, who runs New Zealand's own Viva La Dirt League NPC D&D game.
The biggest thing that I've learned over the years of working with them is just don't fight the chaos, just guide it. Don't try and force against the stream that's raging against you. The stream is not going to stop. You're not going to put your fists up and just stop the water. Your only hope is to just direct the river into the direction you want it to go.
To hear more about how Robert got the gig as the DM of one of the world's most chaotic tables, make sure to tune in next week. Remember to check out my Patreon if you haven't already for even more sneak peeks. Next time you get the chance, share this episode with your friends and family around your gaming table. Another great way to help boost the show is by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or rating the show on Spotify. I appreciate all of you for helping me grow. My new intro and outro music is by Danijel Zambo. The Quickfire Chaos music is by Exacat, and the Quickfire Chaos mood music is by Arcane Anthems. Check out the episode notes for links to their great work. And, as always, until next time, roll some nat 20s for me.